This adventurous story begins by introducing two groups, Moldavia and Velek. In the 20th century, these two were considered the most powerful. Yet, a constant rivalry burned between them over who was the best, because it was obvious that such a great empire could not be ruled by two parties at once. The younger generations of both sides were taught from childhood to destroy their enemies. And so the battles continued until we are taken years ahead in time. By then, Moldavia had fallen under the rule of a cruel king, a warrior named Vlad. His only intention was to spread destruction and secure his dominion. In contrast, his rival, King Mohed, wanted peace across the land. For this reason, Mohed sent one of his men to Vlad's empire to propose a path toward peace. But when that man entered Vlad's territory and tried to speak, Vlad's rage flared instantly. He refused to bow before anyone. Instead, Vlad captured Mohed's envoy and executed him in a gruesome manner. So cruel was Vlad that he hammered stakes into the man's skull so that no one could take his body away. In fact, Vlad had chosen a hill specifically to carry out such sacrifices. Mohed realized then that Vlad would never stop, so the only way to halt his expansion was to kill him. For this, Mohed sought help from Sultan, ruler of a small but valiant kingdom. Sultan's warriors were known for their courage, so he sent a team on a mission to infiltrate Vlad's empire, to uncover his plans and, if the chance arose, to assassinate him. The group was led by a man named Kurt, recognizable by the black wings he wore on his back, marking him as their leader, a title he truly deserved. Every mission he had been given, he had completed flawlessly. Now, he set out with his companions on a long journey, determined to bring Vlad's reign to an end. Meanwhile, we see Vlad visiting one of his men, Sim, in a massive laboratory where strange experiments were carried out. Sim had deep knowledge of biological sciences, and Vlad had tasked him with creating a powerful weapon. Vlad's plan was to develop a virus or plague that could devastate enemy kingdoms, spreading through infected rats. Sim himself had proposed the idea, but the project was still incomplete. He asked for more rats to continue the experiments, so Vlad ordered his soldiers to scour the land for them. The soldiers obeyed, but while gathering the rats, they also committed atrocities against the people, something Vlad was well aware of but chose to ignore. What he didn't realize was that such cruelty would one day push the people to the edge of rebellion. Elsewhere, in a dark cave, Sultan's soldiers rested, discussing how they would break into Vlad's territory. Their mission was dangerous, but every man there knew what was at stake. Among Sultan's team, there was a soldier named Askar who stood outside, sensing something in the air. His mind drifted back to the death of his brother, who had been killed years ago in a brutal war, a loss that still haunted him and one he swore to avenge. Meanwhile, Kurt and the rest of his companions were making plans on how to enter the Romanian cities. Every territory would be guarded by Vlad's soldiers, meaning they would have to cut through the outer defenses before infiltrating deeper. Kurt's men were eager to prove their strength. They knew that if they accomplished the mission given by Sultan, they might earn high positions in the future. With this motivation, they crafted a foolproof plan and decided to follow it to the letter. On the other side, Vlad had a lover named Elizabeth. He confided in her about his plan to spread a deadly disease and take control over all kingdoms established by Mohed. Elizabeth was pleased, imagining herself as the princess of the unified realm, with Vlad as its sole protector. Back in the laboratory, the rats that Vlad had ordered were brought in. Sim was busy performing experiments, injecting them with diseases and plagues. All that remained was to wait for the results. Suddenly, Elizabeth arrived, calling Sim over to ask if the experiment was complete. She needed to relay updates to Vlad. Losing patience, she warned Sim that if this plan failed, he would be killed. This was the first time Vlad had placed such trust in someone. As they spoke, a young boy named Aaron happened to be nearby. He overheard the plan about using infected rats to launch a biological attack. Shocked, he immediately ran back to his village and told his father about the king's scheme. His father was just as alarmed, realizing the danger this posed to the entire kingdom. In the same village lived a beautiful woman named Elika, who cared for her elderly father. Soon, a group of Vlad's soldiers arrived, looting everyone's belongings and killing anyone who resisted. They stormed into Elika's home, where her father stepped forward to protect her. He even managed to push some soldiers away, but one attacked from behind and killed him. Elika was left in shock and grief, helpless to stop them. At that moment, Kurt and his companions arrived at the scene. They quickly noticed the chaos and surrounded Elika's home, cutting down Vlad's soldiers one by one. None of the enemy could stand against Kurt's team, whose training made each man the equal of 10 soldiers. After wiping out every attacker, Kurt and his men tried to comfort Elika, but she collapsed beside her father's lifeless body, weeping. The sight affected them deeply, each of them had lost loved ones in past wars. Nearby, one of their members, Sukin, approached a crying infant whose mother had been killed in the raid. As he lifted the child, memories of his own past came rushing back, how soldiers had murdered his parents when he was young, leaving him alone in the world ever since. Despite the tragic scene he had just witnessed, Sukin made up his mind to raise the orphaned baby, taking full responsibility for its upbringing. But neither Kurt nor his soldiers realized that the good deeds they were doing now would one day lead them to rule and protect an entire empire. Meanwhile, we are introduced to Walker, a Christian priest who received a mysterious parcel at his home. It had been sent by none other than the fisherman, Aaron's father. Inside the parcel was a letter. When Walker opened it, he found detailed information about Vlad's plan to create a biological weapon and unleash a virus across the kingdoms. The letter pleaded for urgent action to stop this threat. Back with Kurt's group, they were advancing through a remote, rugged area, accompanied by Elika, who was caring for the baby. When the child grew hungry, they managed to get some milk from a villager they met along the way. Elika then shared her story, how Vlad had slaughtered her entire family, forcing her to adopt the Christian faith for survival. Sukin responded firmly, saying that no king or empire had the right to impose such control over their people, and that they would take revenge. Elsewhere in Vlad's empire, one of his soldiers, who had survived an earlier attack by Kurt's team, was brought before him. Vlad interrogated him, suspecting the warriors were sent by Sultan. The man, however, could not give a clear answer. Enraged, Vlad beat him severely and ordered his soldiers to hunt down the intruders at any cost and kill them. As Kurt and his men continued their journey, they entered a forest clearing where a tribal camp was celebrating a wedding. A woman named Rosie invited them to join the festivities. After their long travels, the group decided to accept, enjoying the food, drink, and lively atmosphere. Meanwhile, Walker secretly infiltrated Sim's laboratory to keep watch. Inside, Sim was working on various experiments, his ultimate goal to create the plague that Vlad demanded. Sim even extracted worms from the bodies of dead humans and fed them to the rats, hoping this would infect them. Walker observed everything carefully from his hiding spot. Back at the forest camp, Kurt's team relaxed while Sukin took special care of the baby. Sitting together, they discussed how Vlad's cruelty was growing unchecked, destroying countless families. The men agreed that Vlad had to be stopped, no matter the cost. After spending a pleasant night at the camp, they decided to continue their journey the next morning. However, they chose not to take Elika with them. The road ahead was too dangerous, and they didn't want her to get hurt. Elika decided to remain with Rosie and her tribe. Askar also entrusted the baby to them so she would be cared for. Taking her along would only make her a vulnerable target in such perilous times. Elika asked them all to take care of themselves before parting ways. Kurt then knelt beside the orphan child, speaking softly. He told her that even if things began badly, everything could still turn out right in the end. After saying their goodbyes, Kurt and his men set off once again on their mission. Meanwhile, in another kingdom, a soldier came to Vlad with a message from his own king. Their ruler wished to ally with Vlad's empire, knowing they could not survive a battle against Mohed's forces. They were prepared to surrender their lands to Vlad. But Vlad rejected the offer outright. His first target, he declared, was Mohed, and he would not turn his gaze to any other realm until Mohed's kingdom was under his control. Vlad didn't merely want to unite the kingdoms under his rule, he wanted to instill such fear that no one would dare oppose him in the future. He even commanded the soldier to kiss his hand, humiliating the other king by treating him as beneath him. Back in the forest, Kurt's soldiers rested for a while. Some spoke quietly about what lay ahead, feeling this was the toughest mission they had ever faced. Mubara, one of the men, remarked that after all the bloodshed they had caused, it was likely that the soldiers of light would now be hunting them down, and whatever consequences came, they would have to face them. Another soldier, Cuman, sat in deep meditation. He wanted to share something important with their leader, Sultan. As Cuman focused, he found himself transported in a vision to the top of a mountain. There, he saw the possibility of a massive war unlike anything the world had ever known, a battle in which many of their comrades had already fallen. The outcome of this war remained entirely uncertain. Cuman came out of his trance, shaken, just as news reached them that enemy soldiers, Vlad's men, were approaching. They had spotted Kurt's group and launched an attack. In the skirmish, one of Kurt's warriors was struck by an arrow. Though they managed to kill the attackers, the wounded man was in critical condition. Kurt immediately ordered Cuman to take the injured soldier to Sultan, who was hiding with his army deep within the mountains. The group worried whether their companion would survive. Once brought to Sultan, a sacred ritual was performed, a ritual powerful enough to bring back even those who had slipped into a coma. In a way, the people of Sultan who knew black magic would perform such rituals to save the lives of soldiers. Any injured member would somehow be healed. When all this was explained to Kurt and his team members, they were pleased. From there, they immediately set off for their next mission. While traveling, Kurt's team became extremely hungry, so they headed to a nearby village to gather some resources. This was an underground area where very strange fights were held, fights that continued until one opponent died. In the ring, there was a particularly dangerous fighter with a massive build, challenging everyone and claiming that no one could defeat him. The crowd cheered for him wildly. Kurt's team quietly sat down to eat, caring only about filling their stomachs before resuming their journey. But Soon, who was a bit short-tempered, got angry when he heard that no one had ever beaten that fighter. While the rest of the members stayed calm, Sayakan stepped forward to challenge the massive fighter. The audience erupted in cheers as the two clashed. At first, everyone was only talking about the big fighter, but once Sayakan began to display his skills, the fighter started taking heavy damage. Soon beat him so badly that he could barely stand. By the end, Soon had broken both his arms and legs. The fighter, who had never been defeated before, was brought down within minutes. This showed just how powerful Sayakan and the rest of the team were. Meanwhile, Kurt and the others simply kept eating, focused on keeping up their strength for the journey ahead. As they traveled on, they reached a waterway. When Kurt checked the water, it seemed a bit foul, as if someone had deliberately contaminated it. Edsees, one of their teammates, went to drink from another path. Just as he was drinking, a man appeared behind him, watching him. Edsees caught the man, but soon more soldiers from the Blad army arrived. They managed to knock Edsees unconscious and take him captive. When Kurt and the team realized Edsees was missing, they began searching everywhere. The poor man had been kidnapped by Blad soldiers, but his sword was left behind. Seeing it, they immediately knew something had gone wrong and vowed to find him at any cost. Following the hoofprints left by Blad's horses, Kurt and his men reached a village, the main headquarters of Blad, where a young man named Aaron lived. Aaron and the others were surprised to see Kurt's team there, wondering what business they had in the area. The truth was, Kurt's team had come to meet a prince named Viker, a very close friend of Kurt. Viker also had important information to share, which is why he had called them there. First, Viker introduced Aaron, praising him as a very brave young man who had uncovered a dangerous plan devised by Blad. It was necessary to stop him, otherwise a deadly disease would spread. Then we were shown Edis, who was locked in a cage along with the other prisoners. Vlad immediately came to Edis, took him out, and tortured him. He knew that Edis' team members would surely come to rescue him. That's why Edis was tortured so brutally that his fingers were broken. In fact, several people had been assigned to keep beating him until he revealed his team's full plan. At night, all the members were gathered, with Viker also present, who said that Vlad had a foolproof plan. He wanted to spread a disease carried by rats, which could kill many people without even deploying military force. But no one knew the exact solution to stop it. Viker also revealed that a strange healer named Sim was working on it and was almost close to succeeding in his experiments. They had to stop him before that happened. Kurt also mentioned that along with killing Vlad, they must save a companion, Edis, who was in their enemy's custody. Everyone shared their information so they could form a plan to attack Vlad. By morning, Kurt's team was ready to execute their mission. Kurt praised a young boy named Aaron for showing bravery despite his age and helping them so much. As a token, Kurt gave Aaron his Black Wing badge, saying that when Aaron grew up, he could return it and officially join their team. Aaron was overjoyed, and together they all set out toward Vlad's palace. Meanwhile, Vlad was shown leading his massive army toward the kingdom of Moment. He knew that only Moment was left strong enough to face him, and once Moment was dead, the whole kingdom would fall under his control. At the same time, Viker infiltrated the laboratory where experiments with disease-carrying rats were taking place. Secretly, he planted explosives all around and burned the place down. Every experiment, along with the rats, was destroyed, eliminating the first major threat of a disease outbreak. One of Vlad's plans was already ruined. When Kurt and his companions reached the battlefield, they saw Edis, severely tortured and on the verge of death. Suddenly, Vlad and his army arrived, and right before the eyes of Kurt's team, Vlad killed Edis. Witnessing this, Kurt and his members were consumed with rage and charged forward to attack. Vlad was not far behind. He sent thousands of his soldiers forward to retaliate. The battlefield had explosives planted everywhere, which were set off by arrows. Vlad believed these blasts would kill Kurt's team, but they had survived far greater explosions before. Fueled by fury, every one of Kurt's companions pressed forward to kill their enemies. What was about to unfold was the greatest war the world had ever seen. On one side, a few warriors, on the other, thousands of soldiers. Yet despite being outnumbered, not a single one of Kurt's allies felt fear. They were filled with a fierce energy, the kind that only comes from years of constant fighting. Soldiers clashed with one another while the warriors cut them down one by one. Kurt quickly spotted Vlad, who was wearing a shield and killing his men. Fueled by rage, Kurt charged at him, knowing that after killing Adson, he had to face Vlad next. The battle raged on relentlessly. Meanwhile, Sukin's eyes fell on one of Vlad's commanders, and a terrible memory struck him. This was the same man who had brutally killed his mother and father when he was a child. Boiling with anger, Sukin grabbed his sword and went straight for the commander. The two engaged in a fierce duel, while on the other side, Kurt fought Vlad. At first, the commander landed several blows on Sukin, but the fire of revenge inside him gave him strength. With relentless strikes, he wounded the commander so badly that, in the end, he killed him. After finishing the fight, Sukin finally felt a deep sense of relief, peace in his heart after years of pain. Vlad's soldiers were being slaughtered in large numbers, and even Vlad himself was growing weaker under Kurt's constant assault. Despite their numbers, many of Vlad's men fled at the sight of such fearsome warriors. Finally, Kurt delivered a devastating blow that brought Vlad to his knees. Most of the soldiers were already dead. The warriors stopped to watch. But Vlad, stubborn and defiant, shouted that no one could kill him, that he was immortal and would never leave this world. Enraged, Kurt swung his sword and severed Vlad's head from his body. The remaining soldiers were shocked, realizing that with Vlad dead, they no longer had any reason to fight for his empire. The warriors gathered the bodies of their fallen comrades and gave them a proper cremation. The loss was heavy, but they knew that sacrifice was always the price of victory. Kurt and his companions vowed never to let their motherland fall into the wrong hands again. Instead, they decided to rule the vast empire Vlad had built themselves. It seemed a new era was about to begin, one of peace and prosperity. But deep inside the laboratory built by Sim, a dangerous secret still remained. The infected rats that Vigor had burned, one of them had survived, hidden near Elizabeth. This meant the deadly disease was still out there, a threat that could one day wipe out the people of the entire empire. And with that chilling revelation, our story comes to an end.